In a lab, some scientist injects a green goop into an egg yolk. Bam! Another identical yolk pops out like magic. Meanwhile, over in Hollywood, superstar Elizabeth finally gets her star on the Walk of Fame. At first, fans can't get enough of it, but a year later, cracks, dirt, and zero attention. Fast forward, Elizabeth, now middle-aged and low on job offers, is hosting an aerobics show. One day, the women's bathroom is busted, so she sneaks into the men's. While hiding in a stall, she overhears Harvey, the network president, whining on the phone about how she's too old and they need fresh blood. Classy, right? After he leaves, she looks in the mirror like, ouch. Later at lunch, Harvey fires her but dances around it because he's only bold when talking to himself. On her drive home, Elizabeth is distracted by her own billboard being taken down. She crashes her car big time, but at the hospital, the doctor's like, you're fine, not even a scratch. Elizabeth has a meltdown right there in the hospital bed. Before she can storm out, a nurse pops in for a weird spine check, declares her perfect, and sends her off with a jacket. Outside, she finds a flash drive in the pocket labeled The Substance with a phone number and a cryptic note. It changed my life. As she's standing there, wondering what the heck is going on, an old schoolmate named Fred shows up.
Lizzie Sparkle?
He tells her she looks as amazing as ever and slips her his number. Nice one, Fred. What a day. At home, Elizabeth watches the flash drive and sees a video for something called The Substance. It promises to let you switch between your old self and a younger, better version every week. She thinks it's a scam, so she tosses the flash drive in the trash. Classic move. That night, Elizabeth heads to a bar, gets drunk, and ends up back home, throwing up because, well, her tolerance isn't what it used to be. Frustrated, she chucks a snow globe at a poster of her younger self. After the meltdown, she pulls the flash drive out of the trash and calls the number on the note. A mysterious voice on the other end asks for her address and gives her one in return before hanging up. Weird, right? The next morning, and checks her mail, finding a black envelope with a card that just says 503. She follows the address, which leads her to a shady alley. Big surprise. She uses the card to open a door, which only opens halfway, leading her down a dark hallway to a room with deposit boxes. She opens her box and finds a cardboard box. At home, Elizabeth finally opens the box and finds a kit with The Substance, green liquid, a stabilizer, a switch, and special food. After checking herself out in the mirror, she injects the green liquid. At first, nothing happens, but then pain hits and she collapses. Her body twists, bulges appear, and a giant slit opens. Then, surprise! A whole new human being pops out of her like a magic trick. She checks the mirror, and bam, she's in a younger body. The original green eyes are hiding behind some shiny new blue ones. After tossing up some green goo, the new body seals up the old one and feeds it some special food packs. In Elizabeth, she's officially freaked out. But hey, she's young again, so that's something. The next morning, new Elizabeth, now Sue, wakes up to a screeching noise and a bloody nose. All right, she has to stabilize every day. So, she uses the kit to take some spine fluid from her old body and inject it into herself. The bleeding stops and the noise disappears. Phew. Sue heads out, buys some snazzy clothes, and goes to her audition, introducing herself as Sue. Harvey, the network president, is blown away by her new look and hires her on the spot, but only if she can work every other week because she has to take care of her sick mother. Harvey's desperate, so he agrees. The next week, Sue soaks up all the attention, with a new billboard of her face plastered everywhere. She remembers to stabilize every day, though Elizabeth's old body just lies there on the bathroom floor. At the end of the week, Sue does the whole body switch thing, with blood exchanging and all that jazz. Sue passes out, and Elizabeth wakes up in pain from the scar on her back. She goes to work, and Harvey hands her a box of her old stuff without much fanfare. Her week as Elizabeth is super boring. All she wants is to be Sue again. She stabilizes daily and gets another black envelope with instructions to pick up the next refill kit in the shady alley. When Sue comes back the next week, she gets busy building a secret hideout in the bathroom to store Elizabeth's body. Hours of hard work later, a neighbor comes by to complain about the noise, but when he sees Sue, he gets all nervous and shuts up. She tells him Elizabeth moved out and slams the door when he tries to flirt. The secret room is ready, and Elizabeth gets locked away with a big poster of herself. Now, Sue's free to live her best life. Sue hosts her show, everyone loves her, and she parties hard with other young people. She even brings a guy home for a fun night. But then disaster strikes. The screeching noise starts up again, and her nose starts bleeding. Oh, time's almost up. In a panic, she runs to the bathroom, opens the secret room, and sees Elizabeth's body squirming as it finishes the last food bag. Breaking all the rules, Sue grabs some extra fluid from Elizabeth to stay young a little longer. Once she feels better, she goes back to the guy and keeps the party going. Who needs rules when you're living your best life, right? Sue wakes up in the middle of the night after a nightmare where her clothes unzip, and out pop a bunch of organs and blood. Gross, right? She finishes the body swap and moves on. The next morning, Elizabeth wakes up to a total mess in her apartment. There's even a note from some guy saying he'll come back for his bike. But things get even worse when Elizabeth looks at her hand and notices it's starting to look super old. She tries to wash it off, but nope, nothing works. Elizabeth calls the mysterious number from the flash drive, and the voice tells her there's no fix for it. She tries blaming Sue, but the voice reminds her that Sue is just part of her. Oops. Elizabeth spends a day cleaning up the mess and watching TV. But seeing Sue on her show, looking all young and gorgeous, makes Elizabeth super mad, so she switches it off. Later, her neighbor knocks on the door again, trying to ask her out. But Elizabeth, being Elizabeth, just ignores him. That afternoon, she heads to the shady alley to pick up her refill kit. She grabs the box and bolts. Elizabeth walks into a diner, keeping her old, creepy hand hidden in a glove. An old man sitting nearby starts talking about how 7 days feel like forever. Elizabeth notices he has the same birthmark on his arm as the nurse who gave her the flash drive. He winks at her and then drops his wallet, which is a card with the number 207. Oh, it turns out the nurse was just this guy's younger body made by the substance. The man starts rambling about how lonely it is to be alive forever and how hard it gets to remember that the old body still matters. When he asks if the young body has started eating away at her, Elizabeth freaks out and runs away. Outside her apartment, she bumps into the guy from last night who wanted his bike back. He yells at her for no reason, and it's just another reminder of how people see her in her new body. Needing a confidence boost, Elizabeth calls Fred and agrees to go on a date. She dresses up, but when it comes to makeup, she totally copies Sue's style, because that won't come back to haunt her. As she heads out, she sees Sue's giant billboard again, and it makes her feel bad about her own body. So, Elizabeth grabs some accessories and fixes her makeup to look more her age. But even when she tries to leave again, that stupid billboard won't stop staring at her. Back in the bathroom, Elizabeth has a mini meltdown, messing with her makeup and hair until she looks like a hot mess. In the end, she cancels the date and ignores all the texts Fred sends. Classic Elizabeth move. The next week, while Sue is recording her show, she starts freaking out because she feels something weird happening on her rear. She checks, nothing's there. But when they play the recording back on the big screen, Sue freaks out even more. She feels super exposed, so she throws on a robe and rushes to her dressing room. Then she sees it again, the bulge. She starts pushing it through her body until it reaches her stomach. She sticks her hand inside through her belly button and pulls out a chicken leg. Yep, a chicken leg. After the body exchange, Sue wakes up to find Elizabeth's food leftovers all over the place. Elizabeth's been binge eating to cope with her depression. Sue's not happy about it, so she calls the number to complain. She's annoyed that she barely gets to enjoy herself because of work, while Elizabeth just eats and watches TV all day. The voice on the phone just reminds her there's no Sue in Elizabeth, they're one. At work, Sue's shocked to find out her show's taping is canceled. She gets super nervous when she's called to Harvey's office. But surprise! He tells her she's so popular now that they want her to host a New Year's Eve special. Sue's pumped and says yes right away. Later, she goes home and takes more liquid from Elizabeth's spine because, hey, she can't miss this opportunity. Her career is soaring, so she keeps doing it for days. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's back starts getting all green and gross. Oops. When Elizabeth finally wakes up, she screams when she sees her body. It's super old, all wrinkly, and her legs can barely move. She calls the number to complain about Sue again, and the voice offers to cancel the experience, meaning Sue wouldn't come back. But remembering how great Sue's career is now, Elizabeth turns the offer down, yelling at herself for forgetting they're the same person. Later, Elizabeth tries to get up from her chair, but her leg won't work, so she has to move it by hand, and it hurts like crazy. She grabs a recipe book and starts cooking piles of food while listening to Sue being interviewed on TV. Sue mocks Elizabeth's old show, and Elizabeth is so mad she starts throwing food at the screen. Seeing Sue's billboard outside feels like it's mocking her, so Elizabeth throws eggs at it and covers it with newspaper. Before the body swap, she yells at her reflection in the mirror, telling Sue to control herself. The next time Sue wakes up, she finds the apartment a total mess and starts insulting Elizabeth. Seeking revenge, Sue takes several needles of spine fluid to avoid swapping again. 3 months later, Sue is still in control. She's all over TV and the billboard with ads for her New Year's Eve special. One night, she brings a guy home, but tells him to wait while she goes to the bathroom. In the hidden room, it's a trash pile, and Sue keeps extracting fluid from Elizabeth without bothering to clean up. The injection wound is infected, and the liquid now looks dark and gross. Feeling dizzy, Sue calls the number, and the voice tells her she's used up all the stabilizer fluid. It needs time to regenerate, and Sue has to switch bodies to get more. Sue freaks out, refusing to change bodies because her big show is the next day. But her nose starts bleeding, and she collapses. In pain, she crawls back to the bathroom and finally does the body swap. Meanwhile, the guy in her bedroom hears a noise and goes to check. Elizabeth locks the door before he can see her. Ignoring his questions, she looks in the mirror and is horrified to see her new body. It's an absolute mess. Furious, she yells at the guy to leave. When Elizabeth finally comes out of the bathroom, she can barely walk in her new body and keeps falling. She eventually stumbles into the living room, calls the number, and chooses to cancel the experience. Then, she pulls out her old poster from the secret room to remind herself of her past life. The next morning, a black envelope arrives with a note saying the last delivery is in the box. Elizabeth covers herself in as many clothes as she can and yells at her neighbor, who hides in fear. She runs to the alley, grabs the box, and opens it to find a single syringe filled with black liquid. A voice warns her there's no going back, but Elizabeth ignores it and injects the dark fluid into Sue's body. Just as she's about to finish the syringe, she remembers the big show tonight and stops herself. She gives Sue CPR, which causes Sue's nose to bleed, but Elizabeth sees this as a sign. She grabs the change kit, injects some of her own blood into Sue, and that wakes her up. The two women stare at each other in shock until Sue spots the termination syringe on the floor. She immediately freaks out, chases Elizabeth, and kicks her against her big poster. She tries to choke her against the broken glass. Elizabeth fights back by grabbing a vase and smashing it on Sue's head before running to the bathroom. Sue follows and kicks the door, trying to break in. The kicking continues for several minutes until Elizabeth dies. Covered in blood, Sue finally realizes what she's done and starts crying. But then she remembers her show. That night, Sue heads to the TV station. In the makeup chair, she starts coughing and a screeching noise fills the air. She runs to the bathroom to spit in the sink and a tooth falls out. To test her body, she pulls 2 more teeth, which easily come out, leaving her spitting blood. After cleaning up, she meets with Harvey and the shareholders, offering a closed-mouth smile. But when she gets in the elevator, she discovers her nails are falling off too. A moment later, one of her ears falls into her lap. She quickly covers the hole in her head as a man enters the elevator, and once he leaves, Sue runs back to her apartment. There, she searches for the activator, which was only supposed to be used once. Hoping for a new, beautiful body, she injects herself with the green liquid. She feels intense pain as her back splits open. Once the process is complete, Sue checks herself in the mirror and is horrified to see a deformed creature with Elizabeth's face on its back. After throwing up the green liquid, she puts on the show dress and jewelry and curls her few hair strands, preparing for her next big performance. Desperate, decides to destroy her old poster and make a mask from it. She glues it to her face and adds some lipstick. Feeling a little more presentable, she heads to the TV station, imagining a warm welcome from everyone. But, of course, it's just her imagination. Sneaking onto the dark stage, she waits for the show to start. When the lights come on, she grabs the mic, but only mumbles in her deformed voice. As if things couldn't get worse, her mask falls off, and she starts vomiting body parts. The audience is horrified. One woman screams, and a man calls her a monster. The crowd goes wild, shouting insults like freak and monster. In the chaos, guys start pushing her around, and when she tries to get up, one hits her with a baseball bat, decapitating her. But no worries. Her head slowly regenerates while her arm falls off, spraying blood all over the crowd. The entire room turns into a slip and slide of red, with people slipping and falling everywhere. Elisa Sue somehow escapes the building, running down the street, but she trips and explodes into thousands of bloody pieces. The only thing left alive is Elizabeth's face, which crawls out of the mess, happily climbing onto her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She stands there, remembering the good old days, before melting away. The next morning, a janitor comes by with a floor scrubber and cleans up the blood like it's just another spill.